Welcome everybody to the Rainey review for 30 September 2025. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested in various asset classes for the 3 months ended 30 September 2025. The leader over 3 months is emerging market shares in red, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have grown to $1.15. In second place, in all blacks black, is New Zealand property, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have grown to $1.14. Middle of an unambiguously positive pack is a 50-50 mix of shares in property and cash and fixed interest, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have grown to $1.05. That's a very good start. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested in those same asset classes now over the 12 months ended 30 September 2025. The leader over 1 year, just pipping emerging market shares in red into second, is unhedged international shares in navy, where $1 invested 12 months ago would have grown to $1.28. In second place is emerging market shares in red, where $1 invested 12 months ago would also have grown to $1.28. Middle of that positive pack is that 50-50 mix of shares in property and cash and fixed interest, where $1 invested 12 months ago would have grown to $1.10. That's a very good year. But I always say 1 year is not long enough. We need at least 3 years' data. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested in those same asset classes now over the 3 years ended 30 September 2025. The leader over 3 years is unhedged international shares in navy, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.85. In second place is emerging market shares in red, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.61. In third place in Australian gold is Australian shares, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.53. Middle of that really strong positive pack is that 50-50 mix of shares in property and cash and fixed interest, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.33. That is a very strong 3 years. As we march through spring, or at least what feels like it on the day of filming, I was struck by the thoughts of these two smiling, with apologies to old blue eyes, happy individuals. The first is of course Frank Sinatra, whose classic song "You Make Me Feel So Young" I borrowed from in my first line. The second chap is Professor Richard Easterlin, known by many as the father of happiness economics. I won't torture you by mangling any more Sinatra songs, but I do want to talk to you about happiness economics. I get that happiness and economics are not two words that naturally go together. In fact, when I suggested this topic to my colleagues, I got more than a few guffaws, with most of them asking if I knew what both of the words really meant. Given I know quite a bit about economics, I can only assume that that's a crack about what I know about happiness. So, what is happiness economics? It is the study of happiness and quality of life, sometimes captured or represented by utility in upward sloping charts, which we all know make economists very happy. Like most fields in economics, it involves some hard data, such as GDP, individual income level, employment, economic security, but also subjective analyses, such as survey results and social connections. This can make it quite hard to model. One of the key findings of happiness economics, and I acknowledge it's a bit of a well duh moment, is that people in rich countries tend to be happier, and richer people in those countries tend to be happier still. But there is more to it than that. One of Professor Easterlin's key findings, known as Easterlin's paradox, is that happiness does increase in income, but it tends to plateau. In this way, it appears that happiness displays that old economics truism of diminishing marginal returns. But it also means that there's more to happiness than income. This led me to investigate other measures of happiness, such as this one, taken from the World Happiness Report. These tables are taken from this report, which ranks countries by happiness based on a number of measures, and has New Zealand, which wasn't on the other chart by the way, a very creditable 12th when ranking happiest countries. Interestingly, the same dataset ranked by GDP per capita, or income, had a bit of crossover but was not one for one. New Zealand ranks 24th in GDP per capita. Ireland, in first place by GDP per capita, ranks 15th for happiness. So I guess what that means is that income's nice, but it's not the only thing. Social support, life expectancy, freedom, generosity, lack of corruption, social connection, and lots of others are important too. While the basic premise of happiness economics, that people in richer countries tend to be happier, and richer people in those richer countries tend to be happier still, is not surprising, it isn't the only measure of happiness. Here in New Zealand, we are unlikely to be the wealthiest country in the world, but we can be among the happiest. And that's a nice way to talk about a very positive quarter from a returns perspective. And for those of you, maybe myself included, who think that happiness economics may be a load of old hokum, there must be something to it. Professor Easterlin died earlier this year at 98. Thank you all for watching. I look forward to updating you again in the next edition of the Rainey Review.